Good morning. Welcome to the morning session. Good governance in sports, setting standards, raising bars. I'm Roger Pielke. I'm moderating again this morning. I have been asked to make two announcements. The first is if you're a speaker, please send your presentation as soon as possible to medita@playthegame.org. And if you don't, your FIFA ticket will be taken away for tonight. Speaking of that, if you have a FIFA ticket that you will not be using for tonight since there's demand, you've been asked to please hand that to Maria. She's going to be selling them outside the venue tonight to raise some money. There is a lot of demand tonight, so if you aren't going, share that ticket. All right, our first speaker is Jens Weinreich, who's going to give us an overview of corruption cases in international sports organizations, a brief summary. Jens.
Good morning. Oops. Which one works? Okay, does it work? Yes. My boss Jens Andersen ordered me to have a brief summary, just 10 minutes, maybe 11. What I'm saying, the cases I mentioned, you all know more cases. I say before, you all may know more cases. And I have to be juridically precise. That's why I say the definition of corruption I'm going to use in the presentation is corruption is the misuse of entrusted power or, say, elected authority for private gain. So in theory, we have the IOC in the Olympic circuit as the supreme power. I know this is a topic being discussed over decades. Is it a supreme power or not? Who is responsible for misconduct and so on. We got 206 NOCs right now. We got 35 Olympic IFs, 5 continental associations of the NOCs, and 4 Olympic organizing committees at the same time. Autonomy. Interesting quote from Richard Pound yesterday. That mantra is from an ancient era. Autonomy must be earned. I mean, I guess Richard meant it in the relation of sport and politics, but you can also use it, if he allows, you can also use the quote in relation to the IOC, sports organizations, IFs, and the IOC. This is an ongoing discussion. You can find the discussion also in court documents, in CAS documents, and so on. So let's start with Baku. It's not a federation, yes, but the Olympic world was very satisfied in Baku 2015 in June earlier this year. We got a Baku session later at Play the Game, and I would say we have a bad connection. The dictator Aliyev and some NOCs, the EOC, European Olympic Committees, and even IOC, since some EOC members like Pielke, the president, you can see on the left of Aliyev, is an IOC member as well. So it was surely a, let's say, private party of the Aliyev family. Some say Aliyev family is a mafia family. Ilham Aliyev, and that is something probably not well known, is also the NOC president of Azerbaijan. We have similar examples, for instance, in Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko and others, and I guess in all continents. The question is, how much money has the mafia family stolen? I strongly recommend the OCC RP reports. Another question is, of course, press freedom and human rights, but this is, on this session, not our main topic. Looking at Baku and the responsibility of IOC, EOC officials, there were some reports, not only in the British media, also, for instance, in Germany, German TV, ARD, and the question was to Pielke many times, how much money has EOC earned, how much money has EOC gotten from Baku organizers, from Aliyev? There was no answer at all. It's always a question of transparency, a question of contracts, and so on. Another example, and I have to be very precise now, Sebastian Coe, BOI, is he still president? I think so. EOC, IAAF president, soon an IOC member. This is a question of conflict of interest. A man who was in charge of the development plan of Baku 2015 with his company CSM Strategic, and he also took part at the vote at the EOC assembly, at the vote for Baku, for the Baku Games. So, if I remember right, after his election as an IAAF president in Beijing, he was telling the world, no, there's no conflict of interest at all. It was not only asked because of the Baku Games, there are some other connections between his sport official life and his business life. IAAF, that was a topic last night in regard of the doping cases. Diak family business, as far as I know, that was never a big topic for the IOC Ethics Commission. Yes, Lamin Diak was a topic as part of the ISL thing. He took money from ISL company years ago. There is another topic of his son, cash requests from World Championship bidders, cover-up of doping scandals. That was a topic last night. So it's, as far as I see it, it's not a big topic for the IOC. FIFA, yes, we have to mention it. The Department of Justice considers FIFA as a racketeer, influence, corrupt organization. That is important for the whole juridical process. We got systematic corruption in FIFA and in the federations and the continental federations. And the question is there any action by the IOC? I don't know so far. Yes, there is a so-called demand of the IOC president. I mean, he said something last week. And if I remember right, during the IOC session in Kuala Lumpur, there was the question of the membership of Josef Blatter this time. And if I remember right, Bach said something like, we have cleared that. Blatter has written me a letter and we had a phone call, and that was it. So it's not, I think, it's not, it does not cope with the Agenda 2020 and the propaganda connected with. So FIVB, I mean, that was always a big topic at Play the Game. The new thing is criminal probe by Brazilian Federal Police against the acting president, Ari Graça. Again, it's about misuse of sponsorship funds. Any action by the IOC? I don't know so far. And, yes, and you all know him, Mario Goichman. 10 years ago, he got the Play the Game award, and I continue to say his presentation 10 years ago was one of the most emotional presentations and the most convincing presentations I ever heard in my life. I mean, this was special. And what he did, what he discovered, what he was able to document, I mean, he presented all documents of big corruption. I mean, this was, I always used to say, probably the best journalistic, best journalistic revelation of all time. So, but the question is still, or the fact is still, Jens Andersen mentioned it last night as well, the whistleblower was punished, his life is destroyed, but the crook has stolen $33 million. And my question is connected with that. Is there any IOC support for Mario Goeschmann? Has there been any support? So, weightlifting, that was a topic, IWF, that was a topic 2 years ago at Play the Game as well, presentation by my German fellow Grit Hartmann. Tamajayan, the president, is still an IOC honorary member. There's a question of unaccounted millions of dollars from Olympic revenues. The IOC, you can read it in reports and CAS reports and so on, IOC declined responsibility to act. Typical, seems to be. IHF, Cristal is sitting there, and he had several presentations during several Play the Game conferences. Hassan Mustafa is still the president. There are still open questions about financial irregularities in IHF accounts. We got the corruption cases at Olympic qualifiers 2008, and there's a widely open question of the role of Sheikh Ahmed Al-Sabah, the very important, a key IOC member, very influential IOC member, and he is the man behind, one can say, he's surely the man behind Hassan Mustafa. And his role is a widely open question and is always be questioned in AFC, which means an IOC, OCA, FIFA, he's now a FIFA EXCO member, and ANOC and so on. So just a quick quick note to the ISL corruption case. You all know that 142 million Swiss francs were paid to IOC officials, to mostly FIFA officials, but also to officials FIBA, basketball, FINA, swimming, IAAF, OCA, and so on. And the question is still, has there ever been a real IOC investigation? So then we got some cases of state corruption. You all know that Russia, Qatar, and others like Azerbaijan and many other countries. You got widely open questions about Olympic tickets. As far as I see it, and there are many examples for that theory, NOCs are in many countries a sort of a safe haven for crooks from international federations. What I mean is, I give the example of Chet Green, on a small island. He is a guy from a small island of Antigua. We also had a presentation at Play the Game years ago. Chet Green is a crook. It was proven by an opposition 10 years, 11 years ago. He was one of the best buddies of Jack Warner, and he dealt almost with everything you can deal with. And you can earn money, you can milk money. But now, when he got fired from his federation, from his football federation, FIFA stepped in, FIFA gave him a job, and a few years later he became the NOC president. And what he is doing is the same he was doing as on FIFA, as a football official. He's dealing with Olympic tickets. In the years before, he was dealing with FIFA, with World Cup tickets, European Championship tickets, and so on. And there are much more examples. FINA, there are several government issues. I strongly recommend the stories by Craig Lord from the Times, and he also is running a swimming website. AIBA, that was also a topic 15 years ago at Play the Games. I think Gerd Heiberg was here, and he promised to step in. But the problem is the crooks are still there. Just look and Google for Gafur Rachimov. He's still responsible. I think he's still the vice president. He's on the FBI most wanted, or the American most wanted list. So, and he is responsible for business in AIBA, in the World Federation of Boxing, and for the World Series of Boxing. As I told before, that was only a brief summary. All of you have much more examples and much deeper knowledge. Thank you.
So our next speaker is Arnout Geeraert, who will give us some more details on the Sports Governance Observer following from last night's presentation.
We're creating some anticipation here. Yeah. Okay, good morning, everybody. For those of you who did not see me yesterday, my name is Arnout Geeraert. Again, I'm a researcher at the University of Leuven, but also engaged by Play the Game, primarily to write this report, Sports Governance Observer report, and I walked you through the contents of this report yesterday. And in case you didn't get it already in your conference package, there is a voucher which you can use, and you can get one of these, and I would advise you to do so if you're interested in good governance in sport. Okay, so this report, there are three main parts. You will see there is an introduction explaining the background and everything. Then there is a scientific study on the governance structures of international sports federations. Finally, we have the Sports Governance Observer benchmarking tool and the results of the application of this tool to the 35 Olympic sports federations. Yesterday, told you about the third part. I told you that I had used this tool to analyze the 35 international Olympic sports federations, and the results were not that positive for the federations, or for, I would say, the most of the federations. The combined score, good governance score, SGO index as I call it, of the federations is 45%, which points out that there are some structural problems in these organizations. Now, in order not to repeat myself and in order to make this interesting for you, to keep everything interesting, I will not be discussing the Sports Governance Observer benchmarking tool or the scores of the federations today. I will talk about the study. And then yesterday I told you that these exercises, these benchmarking exercises, are inherently subjective. It's always like that. I mean, when you give a score of 1, when you give a score of 3, when you give a score of 4. And that's why I included, as I told you yesterday, a scientific study, a very objective scientific study that looks into the structures of the federations. Now, I start this study by asserting that we are seeing a legitimacy crisis, in the sense that the legitimacy of international sports federations is under threat. For a long time, a very long time actually, we accepted the regulatory monopoly of international sports federations. We, as a people, we accepted them. Governments accepted that the rules that they devise have a very important impact in our territories. Athletes, they respected the federations. Clubs, internal stakeholders, we all accepted and respected the federations. Now this legitimacy of international sports federations is declining. More precisely, there are 3 forms of legitimacy of international sports federations that are under threat. And I want to walk you through these 3 today. We have output legitimacy, procedural legitimacy, and structural legitimacy. Output legitimacy, that refers to, do these organizations produce the desired outcomes? Well, we see, especially in the past 2 decades, that they fail to deal with an increasing number of governance challenges. Many of these challenges you will hear about at the Play the Game conference. doping, match fixing, transnational criminal activities, human trafficking, unsustainable events, and so on. I'm not saying that they're not doing anything about this, but they struggle to deal with these issues. Secondly, procedural legitimacy. This is about, are international sports federations working, well, their internal workings, do they conform to generally accepted procedures? What have we witnessed in the past 2 decades? That internal stakeholders are increasingly contesting these organizations. They contest the fact that they lack participation in their structures. Of course, we have also seen unfair and opaque internal procedures, and most severely, we have witnessed some severe cases of corruption, of course. Final element of legitimacy, structural legitimacy. Are international sports federations the right organizations for the job? Here we see that increasingly athletes are seeking alternative structures. Think about what happened in speed skating. Clubs in some cases also seek alternative structures. Think about what's happened in football. And also people are starting to do sports outside of the formal sporting system controlled by the federations. What do these federations do about this? Well, they do 3 main things. They have 3 main strategies. First of all, they engage in self-legitimation. They refer to the autonomy of sport. The autonomy of sport is a sacred principle. Sport should remain autonomous. We are the best ones to deal with this. They use this autonomy of sport in their discourse with political bodies, with press, and so on. Second strategy is horizontal legitimation. We have witnessed many international sports federations that engage in partnerships with political actors. Many of them have a partnership with United Nations body. They also engage in partnerships with the European Union. And what they hope to get from this is that some of the legitimacy of these political bodies that have legitimacy, that are legitimate political bodies, is transferred to them. Final strategies, they engage in governance reforms. We have witnessed some governance reforms, and they are commendable. Now, in many of the cases, we do see that they do not suffice, that they are insufficient governance reforms, especially in the case of FIFA, of course. They engage in governance reforms, but they should go a lot further. So what do we see? These 3 strategies, they are not sustainable. They may work in the short term. They may give international sports federations some legitimacy. In the long run, they are not sustainable. And the danger is that international sports federations face disempowerment. And that's problematical. Yesterday I told you that we need international sports federations. We need them to deal with the many challenges that face international sports governance. They are the ones that can bring order and structure in international sports governance. So we really need them. But if their legitimacy is under threat, if they fail to produce outcomes, if athletes are seeking alternative structures and so on, they face disempowerment. And this may lead to instability and disorder in international sports governance. So it's very problematical. It is in their best interest that they regain their legitimacy. How can they do this? Well, there is only one sustainable and good strategy for this, and that is improving their institutional design, improving their governance. Only when they do this, they will be able to sustain their legitimacy, to regain their legitimacy. How can they do this? Well, I have 5 sets of recommendations. You can read about this more in detail in the report, of course. First of all, screening and selection mechanisms. If you make sure that before you hire somebody, you screen him or her on professional and integrity criteria, you are able to sort out the good agents, the good officials from the bad ones. Now, this does not happen in international sports federations. Only 4 federations have a nominations committee that performs such checks. They should install this. Secondly, monitoring and reporting requirements. This refers to the fact that if you know that you are being monitored, if you know that you are being watched, that somebody is looking over your shoulder when you are conducting your task, then you will be motivated to perform your tasks better. This refers, of course, to transparency. What do we see? You can read about it in Sports Governance Observer report, but the majority of the federations, they do not report to the general public or to the stakeholders. They do report to their member federations, but quite often the quality of reporting is lacking. Thirdly, administrative procedures. This refers to defining steps a priori, so before sports officials start conducting their tasks. Defining steps that they must follow. And if you define these steps, if you implement administrative procedures, you can control sports officials a priori. Yeah? This does not really happen in international sports federations. There are weak conflict of interest rules, weak ethics codes, weak event hosting procedures, insufficient quorums, insufficient athlete representation, and so on. Fourthly, institutional checks. This refers to installing a body or a mechanism that controls those that are conducting their tasks, and that sometimes hold veto power. What we see is that there is a lack of robust ethics committees and internal audit committees. So this is not implemented sufficiently. The final thing I want to discuss with you today is elections. Elections are in principle a beautiful control mechanism. If there is a threat that you are replaced by a challenger if you do not perform your task well, this will incentivize you to perform your task better. Now, we do see that the majority of international sports federations have good and solid election mechanisms in place. The majority, not all of them. But all of them lack good functioning term limits. And there is a big problem with term limits if you do not implement them. And I have screened the literature for you, academic literature. There is an abundant literature on this. There is general consensus that term limits are positive. But let's not go into that in great detail. Let me just quote Dick Pound, because he was able to summarize this in one simple sentence. He said, "You don't get re-elected if you rock the boat." Now, with term limits, senior officials are more likely to rock the boat. We've seen this in numerous studies in academia. Of course, also term limits are a good remedy for concentration of power, apathetic voters. They generate diversity and they replace bad officials. So to conclude, international sports governance is experiencing a legitimacy crisis. Problematical because they risk disempowerment. International federations may lead to instability and disorder. We don't want that in international sports governance. We really do not need that. So, my message is, it's really in the best interest of international sports federations to regain legitimacy, sustain legitimacy, to engage in reforms. And again, I want to call upon them to engage in a dialogue with us on governance reforms and help us improve this sports governance observer tool. We do share a common goal and a common interest here. Thank you very much.
All right, if you'd like to hear more from Arnaut on the Sports Governance Observer, there's a parallel session at 11:45 where you can talk more about that. All right, so we've had two overview talks, and now we're going to hear the perspective from 5 different organizations. We'll have 3, then we have our coffee break, then we return for 2 more, and then we'll have our panel discussion. So the next presentation is Pâquerette Girard Zappelli, Chief Ethics and Compliance Officer from the International Olympic Committee. And the title of the presentation is Ethics and Good Governance, Olympic Agenda 2020.
Thank you very much. It's not easy to start this morning. I had the IOC mentioned numbers of times during these 2 first presentations. So, of course, some of you may know me. In fact, I don't refuse the polemic, and even I like to discuss and to intellectually battle. But I'm also considering the fact that if we are intelligent, if we really want to move forward, it's good to say things, but it's much better to cooperate and to move forward with it. So if rather than going again and speaking about the past, just move and see what's the future. And in brief words, that's what I would say. Further to this, in the room should be the doyen of the IOC, Richard Pound, and I suppose that Richard Pound is in a much better place than me to answer the various attacks made against the IOC this morning. So, shortly, because I want to try to be in the time, I like to start with a picture of Mr. Pierre de Coubertin, not because I'm French and Swiss, but basically born French, but it is because it is the origin of the Olympic movement, the origin of what makes the difference between sports and the Olympism. It is the addition of values. So, in fact, effectively, ethics should be the DNA of the Olympic movement. Another thing is the question of the balance of responsibilities. We spoke about this, Jens mentioned the question of responsibilities. That's something which is clearly difficult and important. Historically, the sport is based on volunteering, and it would be stupid not to mention that the sports movement faced a number of challenges with the increase of its revenues. It would be also a mistake from the sports side as well as the observer sides not to consider the need of sports autonomy, specifically by governments. When you speak about the interference of politics within the NOCs, that is something which is absolutely key, is to remind that this must not be. This is not fundamental principles of autonomy, is that government must not take care about the government of sports. However, this is something which is also key, that you cannot have autonomy without to deserve it, which means good governance. This is not something new when I'm speaking this today. It is from the past the basis of the principles of the Olympic Charter. Other things to think about, the complex responsibilities. Sport is a mix of responsibilities. Of course, sports organizations are private organizations, mainly on the base of association, wherever they are based, the law, mainly it's associations. But they are also the responsibilities of the publics, governments, public authorities, because of the public funding, in particular with the infrastructures, also the fact that sports is also a problematic with health, and also used for societal peace, specifically in the cities. So governance of sports is very complex. All these factors have to be taken into consideration when you want to find good solution for the problems. There is also another problem, or another things we have to take into consideration. It is a various level. International organization, but continental association, national federations, they are also voting and interfering. I don't want to go into detail, but if you look at FIFA story, mainly the problem is linked with these different levels of organization within the FIFA. Next point is that each sports organization is responsible for respecting the applicable law and assessing the risk and reacting accordingly. Yes, in the Olympic Charter, it is written that the IOC is leading the Olympic movement. What does it mean? That means that the IOC is giving a framework. It's supporting for this framework to be live, to be strong. But this doesn't refrain the responsibility, individual responsibility of each of the sports organizations. So yes, Giants, you're right. The IOC is a leader. But yes, all the federations have to be responsible for what they are doing. And the IOC is not able to interfere in the management of these federations. So it's very important to make this difference, to take this point into consideration. However, as mentioned in these slides, there are numbers of situations for which the sports movement set global and common solutions. I don't want to go too much in detail on this, and we could discuss this afterwards. With regard to good governance, as I just mentioned, it is part of the fundamental principles of the Olympisms. However, there are two main dates or moments which this topic has been raised up. Of course, after the Salt Lake City scandal, you all know that the Ethics Commission has been set up, by the way, at the same time as WADA has been set up in 1999. However, in 2009, the IOC, because it is his responsibility to lead the Olympic movement and to set up a framework, for the first time put on the paper these basic universal principles of good governance and make them approved by the World Congress. What is the Congress? All the recognized organizations, the NOCs, the IF, and all recognized organizations, being from the Olympic sports or non-Olympic sports. So this was a real push forward. The Agenda 2020, in fact, is the next step. After to have been approved, it was clear that probably numbers of sports organizations were not so decided to comply with them. So the Agenda 2020, which was approved by the session, not the Congress, so please make the difference, decide to oblige and to push the organization to comply with those good governance basic principles. What does it mean, in fact? To be really honest, I have to tell you that we are still working on how this recommendation will effectively be implemented. That's why I accepted to come this year to discuss with you, because I wanted also to hear from you how you wanted to have this, your good ideas. Basically, as we have to respect the sports autonomy, sports organization autonomy, it is based on self-evaluation. This means that we are now preparing and working at the IOC level to have various tools to be proposed to IFs as well as their continental association and their national federations, which, by the way, are the members of the National Olympic Committees. So also another tool for National Olympic Committees and the NOCs. These tools must work together so that they may be able to self-assess their situation on the basis of the good basic principles. Of course, this is not enough. This requires a report on this self-assessment and maybe possibly an evaluation by the IOC. The idea on the back of the Agenda 2020 is to persuade of the interest of these self-assessment tools. As you just mentioned, that is absolutely key for the credibility of all the sports movement, not only for the IOC, not only for the general Olympic movement in general, but individually for each of its organizations, international, continental, and national level. That is absolutely a key. So the idea on the back of this Agenda 2020 is to persuade the people that they have to self-assess themselves and to improve this level of good governance. Doesn't mean that the things will be done in 2 minutes, certainly not, but I'm very optimistic on this. For the IOC, it was to go also a step forward in terms of financial transparency, to decide to be audited according to the international financial reporting standards, even if through the laws, national law of Switzerland, we are not obliged to do this. And secondly, to publish this alliance policy for the IOC members, including the president. I'm sure you have heard and read this. Very briefly, as far as the Ethics Commission is concerned, the Agenda 2020 push forward review of the Ethics Commission, and the improvement here that the Ethics Commission's members are now elected by the session. They were elected for the first time in Kuala Lumpur in July. And I don't want to get into details because I'm sure you know this. The second point was the launch of an integrity and compliance hotline, and to change the position, in fact, my position, from Secretary of the Ethics Commission to Chief and Compliance Officer, which is still prevention and advice, which used to be my basic work, but to more move on detail on the compliance aspect of the mechanism. Shortly, we also review the IOC Code of Ethics. I think it's important I draw your attention to this, because for the first time there is a detailed scope of application of this Code of Ethics, and please do not hesitate to have a look at it. Also, within the fundamental principles, we stress on the need to respect of international conventions, specifically on human rights, insofar they apply to the Olympic Games. I don't want to get into this debate. I think you will speak about this tomorrow, but that is very important also that for you to understand that the IOC move forward clearly on a very transparent way, not only on the RCT contract, but also within the IOC Code of Ethics. The rest is not change for the Code of Ethics. Don't forget that the Code of Ethics is only basic principles, so that I don't know. These are the implementing provisions. You know them, it's very detailed, everything is transparent. Just shortly also, the IOC transparency, it's very important. It was a reproach, which was effectively a good reproach, was to say, why don't you publish a RCT contract? It has been published numerous of times, but not systematically. So now it is systematic, and you probably have the opportunity to look at the various documents, because the RCT is a block of different texts. As you know, the sessions are broadcast live. As you know, we have a financial transparency. We have an independent audit committee and an independent internal auditor. We have an annual report activities and a very strong risk management and process supervision and control for the IOC administration itself. So I guess the IOC is having the tool in place, and I don't think there is any problem with regards to this management. Before to leave the floor, I know I'm relatively long, but it won't be possible for me not to say 2 words on the recommendation 15 and 16 with regard to protection of clean athletes, because this is part of the Code of Ethics too. First, the IOC, the Olympic agenda, wanted to stress on the willingness to change the philosophy strongly. Not to say we spend money to fight the cheaters, but just to say we have to invest to support the clean athletes. Shortly, you see the big difference between doping and manipulation of competitions. It doesn't mean that it's better to be doped rather than to manipulate a competition, but just for you to understand that they are the win process for doping, where it is a losing process with manipulation of competitions. And secondly, that you have tests in doping which you don't have in manipulation of competitions. This, before, as a conclusion, partly on this point, I just want to show you this chart. I know you will discuss this point tomorrow. I probably will not be able to attend this, but I want you to stress on something which is very important. You need to have all those 3 pillars together. That is what the IOC is doing on behalf of the Olympic movement, which means you need to have regulations. And as you see, there is a convention. As you see, we are working with the UNODC for a minimum criminal law criteria. As you see, we are working on an Olympic movement code on manipulation of competitions, which will be very soon approved by the executive board and the IOC. As you see, we need monitoring at the same time. We have this EBIS system, but we are also working now with Interpol to create a specific dedicated antenna on sports cheating and criminality within Interpol. As you see, we need education for the athletes, the blue, but also for law enforcement and governments and officials outside of sports. So it is a complex situation, so don't forget tomorrow when you will speak about this, that you don't need to have only one small piece of the beef, you need to have the whole beef together if you want to move forward. So, as a conclusion, really one more sentence. My message is that we have to have a positive view. Just think about how was the situation 15 years ago? Salt Lake City scandal, 1999. How we are together today? Much better. Who is able to tell me that we regress? No one will tell me this. We all improve. The IOC, all the federations agree it's not easy, agree there is still a lot of problem. But we have to prove and to work together to improve the situation. When I say together, it's the IOC with the sports bodies and also all the NGOs, all the governments, because all together we are sharing a part of the responsibility. Not only the sports, but the government, not only the sports and the government, but also the NGOs. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Wilhelm Rauch, the head of legal services for the Swiss Federal Office for Sport, and the presentation title is Limits to Autonomy, the Olympic Family Under Swiss Legislation.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. So I was asked to say something about the Swiss legal system concerning sports federations. I hope I won't confuse you too much with my presentations, as lawyers tend to make things more complicated than they really are. The International Olympic Committee chose Lausanne as its headquarters in 1915. Numerous sport federations and international sport organizations have since followed the IOC to the shores of Lake of Geneva. It's fair to say, therefore, that Switzerland is now the home of world sports. 38 international associations, including the international football, ice hockey, ski, cycling federations, are based in Switzerland. Added to these federations are around 25 international sports organizations, the IOC, the WADA, and the Court of Arbitration for Sports among them. Recent events at FIFA have made the public and Swiss politicians aware of the fact that many of these world sport associations are organized along the lines of a Verein, an association, according to Swiss Civil Code. At the same time, some of them generate very high turnover activities, such as marketing and broadcasting, marketing of broadcasting or of marketing rights. Consequently, some politicians are calling for an end of the status of associations for these international sport federations, which should opt instead for a legal form that is prescribed for commercial enterprises. Their argument is that commercial enterprises are subject to more stringent supervision and must observe more rigorous transparency rules than associations. Allow me, ladies and gentlemen, to discuss a few peculiarities of Swiss law governing associations and companies. In Switzerland, the law governing association is characterized firstly by the constitutionally enshrined freedom of assembly, and secondly by the freedom of association laid down in private law. The constitutionally enshrined freedom of assembly guarantees the right to form, join, or belong to an association and to participate in the activities of an association. The private law principle of freedom of association also guarantees that the association will have far-reaching autonomy in its internal organization, Consequently, associations enjoy a great deal of freedom in the regulation of their internal affairs. In fact, Swiss law makes it quite easy to form an association. The act establishing the association as a legal entity merely entails the adoption of the Articles of Association by the meeting of founders, meaning there is no need to be entered into a state register or even hold a state-issued license in order to attain legal personality. The intention to exist as an association must be apparent from the Articles of Association, that's it. The article must be in writing and state the objectives and the resources and its basic organization. The law stipulates that the form of an association may be used for the pursuit of non-commercial purposes. You see how Article 60 of Swiss Civil Code stipulates association with political, religious, scientific, cultural, charitable, social, or other non-commercial purpose acquire legal personality. Even if essentially associations are pursuing non-commercial purposes, Swiss law explicitly tolerates an association engaging in commercial activities, provided those activities do serve the purpose of the association, which have, as I mentioned, to be non-commercial. If we take a simplified look at FIFA specific situation, it means that the association must primarily pursue a non-commercial purpose, like here, promoting the game of football all over the world, and that it may pursue commercial activities, for example, marketing, broadcasting rights, in order to pursue its main purpose. If there is such a commercial activity, and that's important, the association must be registered in the commercial register, and as a consequence, to its entry in the commercial register, it's subject to requirement to keep proper account. And if, in addition, high turnover is generated as a result of the association's commercial activities, special provisions also apply. This means that if an association has a total assets of in excess of 10 million Swiss francs, if it generates a turnover of more than 20 million Swiss francs, or if it employs an annual average of more than 50 full-time staff, two of these three criteria must be met. The association must also have its accounts audited by qualified external auditors. In this case, it's subject to the same rules as limited companies. The above illustrates that, while the legislature denies associations the right to cooperate chiefly for profit, it does permit them to engage in commercial activities on a huge scale in order to achieve their non-profit objectives. So, in response to a parliamentary proposal, Swiss Federal Council, the government, stated that at present time it sees no reason to revise the law governing associations, and in particular forbid international sport associations of all kinds of pursuing commercial objectives. As I mentioned, the law contains few rules on the organization of the association. What it does stipulate is that every association must have at least two executive bodies, the committee and the general meeting. The committee manages the association. It must implement the resolutions adopted by the general meeting and represent the association in its external relations. On the contrary, the general meeting of members is the association's most senior body, unless the article of association provide to the contrary. Each member has one vote at the general meeting, and decisions are taken by the majority of votes. This differs from the law on corporation, which stipulates that the voting right is determined not by the number of shareholders, but by their financial influence. In this respect, the general meeting of members embodies a more democratic structures than those for commercial enterprises. Moreover, the general meeting of members formally holds more power than the shareholders, as they not only may elect the committee, they also may directly pass resolutions affecting the association's business activities in detail. Crucially, however, the members must use this power conscientiously and responsibly. I would like to raise 3 points here. Democratic structure. Democracy, according to the one man, one vote principle, can present a problem if associations members are not natural persons but legal entities as we have them in sports federations. We see this at FIFA. Each member of the association has the same voting right, regardless of whether it represents a large or a small national association. Consequently, small majority members wield a disproportionate amount of power. However, the Swiss civil law would permit to create a meeting of delegates which is able to replace the general meeting of members. At that meeting of delegates, member can be allocated a certain number of delegates corresponding with their significance, for example, the number of their national members. Consequently, this meeting represents more accurately the actual balance of power within the association than equally weight voting rights. Second point, good governance rules. It's key responsibly for the general meeting of members or delegates to ensure that principles of good governance are incorporated in the association's regulations. This includes, for example, you know them all, stipulating that important decisions are generally taken by committees that are as large as possible. Clear, transparent process must be laid down for appointments to key roles. Clearly defined, transparent tendering procedure must be established for the awarding of tournaments and broadcasting right. All key roles, it was already mentioned today, are subject to restriction of tenure, and so on. So this is in the responsibility of the members of the association. And then the general meeting of members has not only to take responsibility for the adoption, but also for the effective control and enforcement of the government's rules. At certain associations, however, FIFA among them, there's a risk of an institutional conflict of interest here. This happens if the members profit to such a big degree from the association's development contributions that they no longer satisfactorily fulfill their supervisory responsibility, because securing their financial resources takes precedence. This risk can be countered, of course, by also making development programs as part of a predefined transparent process and ensuring that these programs cover a larger period of time, making the financial situation as more predictable as possible. But where can and should the state intervene in the workings of an association? Although some discussions of the incidents surrounding FIFA have, on occasions, suggested otherwise in recent months, the fact remains that in our society, football is, other than healthcare, education, or national defense, not a public remit, but still an activity under private law. It's not the state's role to regulate a particular type of sports, to ensure that certain competitions are held for a particular sport or that those competitions are marketed. It's, however, the state's job to intervene if an association or their representatives violate our law, or if there is an important risk of this happening. Therefore, Swiss law provides criminal, civil, and administrative tools that can be used to influence the behavior of the associations. I would like to mention 3 of these. Swiss law governing association provides for every member of an association to challenge before an independent court decisions of the associations that are in breach with the law or in breach with the provisions of the articles of the association. This is a consequence of the right of the members to supervise activities at their association. But at the same time, I see and I constate that very, very rare members take this tool and their responsibility just to look on the fingers of the members of the committee. No member of FIFA so far, not even the most criticizing members, did even ever use this tool against their committees. If an executive body commits a criminal act, criminal proceedings can be brought against the individual concerned. That's quite normal in every state where the business activities of an association are concerned. The focus is squarely on offenses against property, offenses involving falsification of documents, corruption, or money laundering offenses. Just recently, at the end of September, our Parliament approved a tightening up of corruption law in regard to private business activities. This tightening of the law has been popularly dubbed as Lex FIFA, although it applies to all business activities of commercial enterprises as well of NGOs. In this context, I might add that different to what is described in the Sport Governance Observer report, there is no condition that the special public interest is required to make private corruption a criminal offense. In the administrative sphere, so I come to the third point, last year Parliament decided that the directors of globally active international sports associations are to be deemed politically exposed persons pursuant to the Money Laundering Act. Consequently, financial institutions must handle financial transactions of these persons with particular caution and, subject to certain requirements, they will have to notify the supervisory authority. So therefore, with all these points, I think it's not correct to say that international sports organizations or federations in Switzerland profit from a quasi-unregulated system, but it's a system that requires responsibility from all persons, from all parties working in this system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our final presentation before the coffee break is Stanislas Frossard, Executive Secretary of the Council of Europe, who will be speaking on the results of the EPAS survey among governments.
The slides are coming. Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to address this conference on good governance issues. I think that most of you know the Council of Europe for its activity in the field of anti-doping, recently on match fixing, and we would like now to share our ongoing work on good governance with this survey of our member states. You need a... You want the key? Yeah. Well, Council of Europe, it's an intergovernmental organization covering the entire European continent, whose mission is to promote democracy, the rule of law, and human rights, and it's doing so in the field of sport with the aim to promote the Council of Europe values in sport through sports and to promote these values in sport. And it has been done so since 1955 with different bodies. At present, we are operating within the framework of a partial agreement, meaning that every interested country in cooperation on sports policy can join it. So far, we have 36 countries member of IPAS, and we also have 28 NGOs and sports organizations, which are our partners for dialogue and cooperation on sports policies. Today I will mention what we have done on promotion of good governance, and it was quite a long way to come to this. We had a ministerial meeting on good governance in sport in 2004. It took place in Hungary, in Budapest. And since that time we have addressed different issues, but it was always rather sensitive, taboo, too difficult to address corruption in the governance of sport until the ministerial conference we had last year in Switzerland, in Macklingen, in 2014. However, we had a number of related standards on issues such as ethics in sport, adopted in 2010, autonomy of sport, principle of good governance in sport, and we did a lot on fighting match fixing. And as we started to work on corruption in sport, there was a strong consensus to address corruption of the game, corruption of the competition, and that's why since 2009 we have worked hard on addressing match fixing, which culminated last year with the adoption of this new convention against match fixing. But at the time we started this work in 2009, we stated that there was also an issue with the corruption in the governance of sport. But at that time, however, there was no political support to address it, but it was agreed it would take place as soon as possible, and now the time has come to address with this in our intergovernmental networks. So we made a short survey to know what's going on at a national level. How do the ministries in charge of sport monitor and scrutinize the governance of sports movement at national level? Why it is important to consider it at national level? Because people who are playing key role, leading role in international organization, they come from the national sports movement. If their cultural background in the national sports organization is to experience a lifelong president and a corrupt environment, they won't be surprised to find the same and to promote the same in international federation. If they experience good governance and a healthy environment in the national sport movement, they are more likely to promote it within the framework of the international sports organization. And in the end, it's the national sports movement that shaped to a large extent the international sports organization. And last but not least, public authorities, government, ministry, they have a stronger grip on national sports organization than on international sports organization, because national sports movement are operating within a national legal framework, and they are benefiting from subsidies, support, and in this way there is more potential for positive influence from the public authorities on the governance of sports at national level. So we had this short questionnaire on the basis of principles of good governance. We had the one adopted by the Council of Europe in 2005. We also make sure to cover the universal principles of good governance mentioned earlier by the IOC representative, and the ones that were more recently adopted by the EU, which are the principle of good governance of the EU, 2013. The method was an online survey, and it was sent to all our 36 member states. We got answer from 21. It took place over summertime this year, and it was an online survey. The answering rate was similar among EU member states and non-EU member states, which reflect our structure of members. So, first question, we ask whether good governance is a topical issue in the country, and it's actually the case in most countries. In 86% of the countries, it is a topical issue. And then how it is addressed? It is addressed mostly through the news, the journalists, in very few cases the courts. The parliament are institutions that are addressing the issue of good governance in sport in 61%, and others may be National Sports Confederation, NOC, and governments. Which are what do these good governance principles cover? And we saw that the most focused principles are those related to democracy within a sports organization. And the less ones are on fairness, representation of different stakeholders by the sports organization. Do you use this good governance principle in dialogue and cooperation with the sports organization? 100% of our answering ministries answered yes. Do you monitor this principle of good governance? Obviously, 95% of the countries answered that they do monitor. And did your ministry express a new expectation on the implementation of good governance principle? In 90%, it was the case. So it's obviously very topical issue in the European countries. How did you do so? Mostly through guidelines, requirement, contract, and sometimes as part of the ongoing dialogue between public authorities and the sports organizations. Did you introduce new requirement to the sports organization? Yes, many countries mentioned that 90% mentioned that they enhanced the rules, the regulation. Very few mentioned that they introduced new funding schemes on the good governance of sports organization. And reporting requirements were also mentioned in 80% of the cases. How do you monitor and scrutinize information on good governance? In most cases, 84%, it's scrutinizing reports made by the sports organization. In 65%, the ministry said that they are collecting information and archiving information from the sports organization. And in only 47%, they organize audit to go more in-depth to scrutinize this compliance with a good governance principle. Did you take a new measure to enhance monitoring of good governance during these last 5 years? Many countries introduced the enhanced the contract obligating sport organization to abide good governance rules. How do ministries and public authority intervene in case of non-compliance? And many, in 17%, they mentioned that they issue a simple warning. In 40%, they stopped or reduced the funding to some sports organization due to non-compliance with a good governance principle. And in very few cases, 15% they complained to open a case to the courts. Was autonomy an issue in your dialogue with a sports organization in this context of implementation of a good governance principle? Many ministries answered no. 70% had no issue with the autonomy. Autonomy was not mentioned as an obstacle for the implementation. Do you have any project at present on the agenda? And several countries mentioned training courses, education of sport officials, and a few mentioned special funding scheme on good governance to strengthen their capacity to increase or reduce the funding to national sports organization in relation with the implementation of good governance principles. Then a few thoughts, ideas were mentioned, education, training, collection of structured data on good governance, funding, reporting requirement, or creation of an international body that is something quite popular, obviously. To summarize, we consider that good governance at national level is definitively on the agenda of the public authorities in Europe. There is a broad awareness on good governance issues nowadays. There is a common understanding on what good governance principles are, such as defined by Council of Europe, IOC, and EU. And the implementation of governance principle is more or less monitored by the public authorities. The less positive side we identified through this survey is that there are less measures at operational level. There is no agreement between sports movement, public authorities and institutions on the measurement indicators, implementation measures. If we go more in detail than the principles of good governance, there is maybe no common understanding of what should be done to implement this good governance. And we considered as suspicious that 70% of the states have no issue at all with the autonomy of sport, because it's something that is coming again and again in the discussion. I would like to conclude saying that the Council of Europe is committed facilitating and supporting good practices by its member states on promoting good governance in sport. This afternoon there will be a session with a number of our governmental experts from different countries, which will share more in detail what has been done in their country to promote good governance. We would like to exchange and promote consensus not only on broad principles of good governance, but also on indicators, specific measures, and we look forward to increase cooperation with NGOs, sports movement, and public authorities on this. And we have been successful to create that kind of dialogue and cooperation on anti-doping, now on match fixing, and I hope that the next step will be to create a common ground on good governance in sport. And we will continue to address it at national levels. Thank you.
All right, thanks to all the speakers. We are very close to being on time. We are now in coffee break. We will start at 10:40 sharp, and if everyone's prompt, that will give us more time for a debate and discussion after the panel completes. Thank you.
How far are you? You have already signed the convention?
All right, if you could start taking your seats. Start pulling people in from the coffee. Two presentations. Two more. All right, we're going to start up again. In our first presentation is from Szabolcs Horváth, member of cabinet of the Commissioner of Tibor Naraxix, and he will be speaking on how the EU works for better governance in sport.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the organizers for inviting me to this up to now very interesting and insightful event. Let me very briefly tell you about what the European Union does for good governance in sports currently. So it's me too. First of all, they were already mentioned, the questions were put about autonomy of sport. Is sport without control? Who should control sports organizations? So what I would like to go through is whether it is the EU's role and task to run sports organizations. I will present you the legal framework, our competencies, our policy tools, the financial resources we have, and the control mechanisms. The legal framework is defined by the Treaty of the European Union. In Article 165, the treaty says that the Union shall contribute to the promotion of European sporting issues while taking account of the specific nature of sports, its structures, based on voluntary activity, and its social and educational function. So what does it mean? It means that no, we cannot run sports organizations. It's not our tool. We've got a supporting competence. We have to help member states and sports organizations in contributing to development of sports in areas which are of international nature. The way we work, based on the general provisions of the treaty, is we've got work plans, 3-year work plans for sports. Now we have the second work plan currently. It's 2014-2017 that is running. And good governance is among the priorities. So in this work plan for sports, we define the priorities for the three years period. And clearly, good governance was the priorities in the first work plan, and it remained among the priorities for the second work plan. The tools we have for implementing our sports policy are again defined by the work plan for the sports. It's we can hold presidency conferences, meetings of sports ministers, directors. We can have studies and conferences. We can have pledge boards. And we also have a financing tool, Erasmus+. And here it's not our tool, but there's a new forum in the European Parliament, it's the European Sports Intergroup. It was formed this year. They also discuss and contribute to the discussions of issues of major interest to European sports policy. You have, those of you who have been already here yesterday, heard that also the study, the Sports Observatory that Arnout presented yesterday and this morning, and that will also be more in depth presented at one of the next sessions, found its origins in EU financing, which I'm very glad to see that it was one of the most successful projects up to now that we have financed in the field of good governance in sport. And we'll have to see how we can build on these results. The way we work is we've got an expert group, not one expert group, but practically we've got 5 expert groups on various fields of EU sports policy priorities. And one of these expert groups is on good governance. And the good governance expert groups got 2 priorities for this 3-year work plan period. First one is the promoting of the existing good governance principles. These are the ones that also Stanislas has referred to in his presentation before, the 2013 principles of good governance that were put together in the previous work plan framework by the expert group on good governance. And there's also a possibility that a pledge board will be set up at the end of this period to make sure that these good governance principles are implemented and monitored. The other objective is developing guiding principles relating to democracy in the context of the procedure of selecting the host cities of major sports competitions. The outcome is due for the second one by the end of this year. So the expert group is finalizing its work on the second objective these months. And the pledge board and the good governance implementation of good governance principles is for next year. The financing tool we have is the so-called Erasmus Plus project. We've got a specific sport budget in Erasmus Plus. Erasmus Plus is now a funding tool that encompasses youth, education, and sports as well. And we've got 265 million euro dedicated for sports. It is the first time in the history of the European Union that there is a dedicated budget for sports in the 7-year financial framework period. It may seem to be a small amount of money compared to all the budget we've got, but if you consider that we managed to dedicate 265 million euros to sports at the deepest recession when we had, because it was negotiated in 2012, 2013, when there were real budget cuts. I think it is a big success that we have managed to dedicate quite a significant amount of money. It's not peanuts if you consider the amount of project that we can finance from it in this dedicated in this very difficult budgetary circumstances. So I think it is a strong signal from member states that they do consider sport as an important area and European sports policy as one of the important policies for the European integration. The money is used for project-based financing. So practically we are launching calls for tenders, and the project that was that has led finally to the Sports Governing Bodies Observatory, the project of Arnout. It was not still Erasmus Plus, it was a preparatory action, but it was a similar thing. So it was a project which was financing good governance principles, and we still have the project. Each year we are launching calls for tenders to support practically this money is there to support the policy objectives. So one of our objectives is good governance. So if there are good projects for improving governance in sports in the EU, it has to be an international one because it's the European Union, so we don't finance national projects, we just finance cooperation among member states. Then it is possible to apply for financing for these kind of projects. So, about the autonomy of sport. In conclusion, what has already been recognized, I think, also by the Olympic Committee, I have to share that sentence, that position. Sports organizations, based on the legal framework that we have now in the European Union, we do not question that there is a need for autonomy of sport. We have also had a study a few years ago looking into this question, and the study came out that yes, the autonomy of sport organization has to stay, i.e. The European Union should not take over the role, and member states' governments should not take over the role of running the sports organization. It is the same conclusion that Arnout has made, that we need sports organizations. We do need the sports bodies, the international federations. There is a role for them. It's not questionable. But they are not above the law. And they do need to respect basic legislation, national one, and EU rules as well. In particular, in the European Union, we have the rules on competition and on internal market that are there to be respected by international and national sports organizations as well when they are setting their rules. And we do have, the Commission does have quite strong competence on controlling the respect for rules on internal market and on competition. So to conclude, it is not our role to run sports organizations, but we can and we do help those sports organizations, those governing bodies who want to do their job properly. And those who do not want to do their job properly, they will have to face the scrutiny based on the tools that I've just mentioned. Thank you very much.
All right, we have one more speaker, and this is a warning to our previous speakers that as soon as this speaker's done, please come up, we'll have our panel discussion. Paul Broberg is the Director of Public Affairs for the National Olympic Committee of Denmark, and his presentation title is there. It's a surprise to me.
Thank you very much. Well, now we spent a few hours on talking about improving governance, and then I'm starting to say that we should start with something else before we start with governance. From the point of view of the Danish Olympic Committee, we think that it's even more important that we start with agreeing on several political issues on sustainability before we start to talk about governance, and we use them as key issues in our international work. First of all, we actually do have an international strategy that is outlining our goals on international affairs towards 2020. And that's at least a first step that we as an NOC is transparent and actually trying to tell you that that's what we're working for. That's what we think that are important to improve when it comes to the international sports world. And there we actually identify three key issues before we identify governance, because we want to talk about financial sustainability, we want to talk about environmental sustainability, and we want to talk about social sustainability. We want a sustainable use of income. We want less economic doping in allocating events. And we want more sustainable investment in participation. And we think we need to agree on these political issues before we talk about the formal governance. When it comes to environmental sustainability, we want to leave a positive step and legacy on climate challenges when we are hosting events all around the world and the globe. And finally, when it comes to social sustainability, we want to make sure that rights of minorities and the population are respected when we do have sports competitions, when we do improve sport, and when we do develop sport. We want more social responsibility when we are talking about school sport, when we are talking about sport for social vulnerable. And actually we do think if we can start to improve this, then we have a base for actually discuss how we are doing it and how can we do it. And there we can start using the frame of governance. And why have we, first of all, said that something is more important for us to work for than governance? Well, we tend to see this as a somewhat mechanical approach. And I do think that we have seen that actually this morning. A lot of paragraph has been written, but what is the real improvement about this? You can have the best paragraph, but you won't see any improvements. You tend to forget political culture all about. Because that's actually what we need to change, is the political culture. And that is not done by only paragraph. That is done by looking at leaders, look at the quality of leaders. What are the sports politicians that we are electing? And then, to be quite honest, this is a subject that can be threatening if you want to have international influence. We cannot in Northern Europe or in Europe as such come with these issues on governance and still think that we will be in the center of the influence. And then you can have, and we can debate this for more days than this conference. When do you need to step up and say no, or when do you want to work inside and say you can improve this system inside? Again, we want to be inside, we want to prove the system inside. And then we actually think that there needs to be more analysis of the power structures, the alliances that we see in international sport than we do have at the current time. And then we actually need to say that we have some weak points that we all need to discuss if we want to improve this. International sports organizations are monopolies. And that is actually, you can't just go to another organization if you're not satisfied with how FIFA is doing, how the Volleyball Federation is doing. You cannot do that. Of course, you can form another federation, but it would take a lot of time before you have a real competition situation. And also, we're 350 people here, but we have to recognize that for the broad population, they don't care and they don't act. 89% of the Dutch population watched the World Cup games of Brazil. Even though that all of us were trying to discuss, is Brazil doing this all right, is FIFA doing this all right, 89% of the population watched the games. And finally, we have to, again, acknowledge that one country, one vote is a system-preserving way of running the international federations. And here we really also could talk, how can we improve this? Is it possible at all? But that is a reminder for us. Instead, we actually think you should start improve the leadership of the sports organizations and the politicians that we do elect. And there we have, that's where we want to use our resources. We want to be better in hosting seminars and workshops for all our elected international leaders. So we get them to have a network, we get them to learn from each other, to know from best practice, to know where are political difficulties, can we talk about them. We want to do individually customized action plans for every of our international leaders in order for them to improve their political influence, in order for them to improve their international positions. We are having lobby contracts with selected national governing bodies where they are obliged to work for these principles, to work for sustainability, to work for some of the key values that we do have in Danish sports, or otherwise they're not getting money from us. So we want these leaders to, in the international federations, step up for some of these values. And finally, we actually want to educate them even more. And there I think we can be proud of that we're not doing this by ourselves. We're doing that together with Sweden, Norway, Finland, and even now the Netherlands. Simply in order to get better competences in how they are acting in a very complicated cultural world, how they're being better of building alliances. And then we can actually achieve. This is Pielke. He's the president of the World Badminton Federation. He's also an INC member. He had an electoral budget of 10,000 euro given from the NOC, and he beat the 6th richest man in Indonesia, who did all the usual stuff. Talked to the African nations about building badminton facilities in each of them. Pielke didn't have that kind of money at all. He had 10,000 euro, but he was clever. He was good in building alliances. He had a name, and thereby he could actually, for the first time, contest the Asian leaders and be now the president of the World Badminton Federation. So we actually do have possibilities. Everything is not as bad as we see sometimes. If we act cleverly, if we think about how we can be political wise, then we can actually do something about this. And then it's not all about money, but sometimes also about politics. In order for us to make sure that we can actually measure how much how much influence do we actually have, we have a World Power Sports Political Index. And we look through the nationalities of all executive committees in 118 international federations. We have looked at fixing 1,640 positions. We're even trying to weigh the influence. So we want to be if we want to have the IOC president, we can see that we have more influence than if we're just the president of the European Pétanque Federation. And thereby, I don't know how much you can see, but thereby we can try to see, okay, how is Denmark doing on this? Can Denmark move up? Can Denmark actually be, are we climbing up the ladder? Are we more politically important? And can we then start about talking about this sustainability? And this is the new, just published Sports Political Index, and Denmark has moved nine seats towards better, to be more influential on the international political, sports political level. And here you can see how the ranks are from we did this in 2013, and now we've done this in 2015. And of course, for us, it's about to measure that things that we do with our leaders is actually, we can see that it's improving. We can see that they're gaining more influence and more political power. So to sum up of this, to get more influence and get more sustainability is the start of even talking about governance. And we need to be better in building better and broader alliances. Europe is just not enough. I mean, we can't have the majority of votes, even if we can get Europe to stand together, and that is quite hard as well. But we need to build the bridges between Europe, between Northern Europe, between Asia, the new powerhouse. If we are not able to do that, then forget about reform or revolutions. We need that. And we need leaders that are able to do that. And then we need more elections. We need more contestants that are having political visions about how they want to improve their international federations. Far too many elections are without any contestants, without any real political visions, without any political ambitions about actually changing. We just come back from the International Tennis Federation General Assembly with a lot of contestants, with a lot of candidates trying to contest for a seat in the executive committee. And that was a real election. That was about how can you improve tennis? How can you improve the organization? But if you don't have anyone contesting, or if the president is standing alone and no one is trying to challenge him because they don't have the abilities as political leaders, then we see the challenges. Then we see some of the situations that have been referring here today. So, better political leaders, more sustainability, then we can start talking about governance. Thank you very much.
All right, if I could ask the speakers to join us at the table. All right, so we have a request from the cameraman that if you ask a question, please stand up or stay seated if you don't want anyone to see you, and tell us your name. And just like last night, we'll ask for short questions, please, that end with a question mark at the end. And we do have some time, so we can take them one by one to start. And if it's for a specific member of the panel, let us know who that is, or if it's for everyone, that as well. So we have a question all the way in the back. Here comes the microphone.
Hello. Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Dennis, and I'm from the University of Hamburg. And thank you all for your good presentations. I have a question for Mrs. Zappelli. And you just said we shouldn't waste time staying in the past. So I'm trying to stay in the present. Only some weeks ago, your president and the IOC president, Thomas Bach, said on the Copacabana beach in Rio de Janeiro that we would see in Rio one of the best legacies, Olympic legacies ever, and that Rio de Janeiro would be a better city after the Olympic Games. So my question to you is, or rather I think that is a very polemic and rather strange statement from the president. And I would like to know from you, what do you think about this statement by the president as an ethics chief of ethics in the IOC, and in exactly also in the weight of the massive human rights violations that are still going on in Rio until today. Thank you.
Do we take all the questions together, or do we answer the questions one after the others?
We'll go one after the other to start, since we have some time.
So. Legacy, it's part of sustainability, and I thank the Danish NOC to raise the question of sustainability, because it's part of good governance, and legacy, it's part of the sustainability of an event. Whatever it is, a national, local, or international event, they must have sustainable legacy, and this legacy must be sustainable. I'm not discussing nor commenting the word of the IOC president. If you want, you have to ask him this directly. But what I can just say is definitely there are various forms of legacy in organizing such an event like the Olympic Games. I'm not the specialist to tell you the list of the interesting legacy of Rio, but certainly there are something in terms of transports and of development of sports facilities in the city. So I don't know if I'm really good in the answer on this point. I don't want, otherwise it would take hours.
Next question, please.
Is it human rights? I don't know.
Up front. We'll make the microphone move around.
Thank you. Jesper Frigas Larsen, Anti-Doping Denmark, and previously 8 times chef de mission for the NOC of Denmark. I have a question concerning also the IOC and some of the questions that have been raised, and the presentation from Pâquerette. It seems to me that Pâquerette very well described how the IOC have gone through many changes and seems to be trying to be leading by example when it comes to good governance. But I also heard, for instance, Jens make the remarks about what does the IOC do about those international federations that are not presenting good governance in the way that they are acting, and it seems to be a cry for the IOC to take more concrete action, not just leading by example, but also take action. Could be in terms of taking away the sport from the Olympic program. It could be in taking away some of the money that is being distributed from Olympic Games in order to try to get these federations to act more properly. Would there be any comments towards that? I would like to hear. Thank you.
Maybe let's start with Jens with a reply. And
I mean, oops, does it work? Yes. Yeah. This is a discussion we have since many years. I remember, for instance, when Richard Pound was the WADA president, we always discussed this, and as far as he told us, journalists, he was willing to suspend federations and nations, no? But it never happened, and I truly believe, of course, we all know the IOC has the power, because the IOC is the owner of the Olympic Games. Of course, the IOC had always have the power to suspend nations and federations, but they never did. Yes, in a few cases, such as AIBA, they freezed some money, but that was it, as far as I know.
Pâquerette, did you want to follow up?
Yes, I agree. Few situations have gone until the very difficult situation. You mentioned Jen's example of AIBA. I want to raise another one, which is the National Olympic Committees of India. And because of the actions of the Indian NOC presidents in jailed for corruption, and the IOC suspended the National Olympic Committee. So until the Sochi Games, the athletes enter the stadium with the Olympic flag. I want to raise another point here, which is important when people are speaking about, yeah, the IOC is having the power, yes, the IOC should suspend, should change the sports in the Olympic program. First, you know, the change of the sports in the Olympic program is something very delicate and very complex. You, I'm sure, have been aware about the willingness for the IOC during the time of Jacques Rauch to change this program and how complex it is. But there is some elements we always have to think about. These are the athletes. Do you want to, if you suspend the federations, if you raise the sports out, what do you think, is that correct for the athletes? Are you thinking that the athletes are responsible if the top of the international federations are not well governed? Do you really think that it is normal? So we also have to think about the effects. That's why of the reason sometimes you could have the perception that the IOC is not acting. But the IOC is taking into account the balance of different interests. And the first one is the interests of the athletes. And that is something you will never be able to say, that the IOC is not thinking and considering the athletes and the importance of them.
Let me follow that up with a question for Wilhelm Rauch. Maybe you could give us a legal perspective. What could IOC, for example, do to a federation like FIFA under Swiss law? Is there even legal potential to impose sanctions, or would that be tied up in the Swiss courts?
Well, there are two elements we have to differ. One is the internal possibilities the IOC has towards its members. So on just the structure within this association, which runs under this title autonomy within the association. The other thing is the government, so the law would not intervene as long as there are no contradiction to any state's law, or if there is no complaint from a member of this association who says our government, the committee, does not comply with their own rules or with our own rules. So the possibilities actually are quite limited for government to intervene.
Jens?
Yeah, just one point to add. I mean, you can even read it in some documents of Court of Arbitration for Sport. If I remember right, the weightlifting case, it was mentioned even in that court, influenced, of course, by sport officials, by the IOC and so on. It was clearly mentioned that the IOC is not even willing, to follow the rules or to put power on, if it's the right expression, put power on the federations. That has always been a problem, and this is not a question of history. It is a question of present and future as well, of course. That is a fact.
Other questions? All right, again, back in the very back.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Lacarrière. I'm from France and I work in Switzerland, speaking here in my own capacity. And I used to work for Sport Accord as an integrity officer for 3 years, and I understand Jens addressed the issue of Sport Accord yesterday. Well, I have a question for Mrs. Girard Zappelli, and maybe to some extent to Mr. Geeraert, because of his knowledge of the governance of the IFs. Well, you can easily find on the IOC website the the hundreds of people part of the commissions of the IOC, but it's harder to find an organigram of the IOC, people working daily within the IOC, and I sense that there is a unbalance between the hard work that Mrs. Girard Zappelli is doing to do and the real means that she has. Maybe I'm wrong on this, but if you are the IOC and you expect it to do a hard work on ethics and there are lots of topics to address, why is that we have a 5-people team working on that, whereas for the marketing, the communication, and the sports department, which obviously is an important one to organize the games, but the ethics commission is such a little level of people. And the reason why I'm asking this is I understand there is some $10 million being invested by the IOC on integrity, and that is massive. It's still a bit hard to know where this is allocated. Maybe part of it is for Interpol. I don't really know. But
right,
why is
let's
that?
Throw
sorry.
it to the. Let's okay. It's okay.
There
But let's
any
throw it to
chance-
the panel. And
Yeah. Is there any chance that this money could be used to reinforce the ethics commission daily operations? Thank you.
Let's start with Arnaut. And this is a great question because it gets to the methodology of the Sports Governance Observer, what's available in public and what you see versus what's behind the curtain, so to speak. So,
Well, first of all, I cannot speak about the IOC in that simply because it was not part of our study. We only looked at the Olympic sports federations. So I would not like to go into the particular structures of the IOC simply because I did not research them. Having said that, yes, this is a very important part of reporting transparency, and it's also part of the Sports Governance Observer. In general, you see that international sports federations, as I told before, are more reporting towards their own members, if they are reporting at all, and not towards the general public. And there is definitely some improvements to make in international sports federations. I would suspect that the same is valid for the IOC.
Pâquerette.
Yes, so there are two points. The first one with regard to the organigram of the IOC. Good point. You're right. There is no organigram of the administration on the website. I agree. I will transmit your remark. It's not the first time, but anyway, I will do it again. Second questions with regard to the allocation of the 10 million. The 10 million have been allocated for the fight for clean athletes. As far as I'm concerned, because my team is not dealing at all with the question of doping, so it's more on manipulation of competitions. A part of this money is used for the 3 years action plan with Interpol. And we are in a very, very small figure then. As you may know, FIFA gave some years ago something like 25 million, so it depends the currency to FIFA. And we are on a very different basis. We are having an action plans, and we are both supporting a part of the cost of this actions plan, transparency, Interpol and the IOC. Second part of the money is used to support these very important study we are doing with UNODC on the criminal legislation. Once again, is not enormous, because we are just having numbers of researchers from university. And finally, yes, this money has allow me to use and to have a new person working with me in the team. So to move from 4 to 5.
All right. Next question, please. We'll stay in the back, then we'll come up front.
My question is for Ms. Zappelli. Last week, Renate Winter from the United Nations Commission on the Child said that the police in Brazil were killing children as part of cleaning up the city for the Olympics. Could you please speak to that?
So, as first, I'm not aware about this. I've not been aware about this personally. So that is one of the things which we are currently discussing with the NGOs. The IOC is not able to have all the information regarding the informations of breaches of the Convention on Human Rights. We are not specialists of this. It has been already clearly said. So if the NGOs are really having enough evidence about what is to breaches of the human rights, we will act within this. But today, I have not been aware about this point. I'm sorry to be very clear. When I say aware, it's not that there is an article written somewhere in the world. I receive numbers of articles from press review to every day, every second, every minute. If you are close to me, you will see that I'm constantly looking at the media. I'm speaking about elements, not about press articles. It is not that I don't consider that I'm just speaking with Jean. I think for me, press is important. But there is a difference between written an article and between the reality of elements on which we can do things. If you have those elements, then please.
This was a United Nations representative who made this statement.
The same. I need to have the elements. Not something like coming from the heaven, but we need elements if we want to act. I'm sorry to tell this, but I will be pleased to discuss because I probably don't understand your questions.
Clearly, you don't.
All right, so let's head up to the front here for the next question.
My name is Bruce Kidd, and I'm from the University of Toronto in Canada. And I have a question for Professor Girard, if that's the correct pronunciation, but I'll invite other members of the panel. I'm struck by the fact that the title of our conference is Global Sport Reform or Revolution. And almost all of the presentations we've heard are about reform. I'm a reformer myself. My presentation will be about reform as well. But given the pessimism that we've heard about the prospects for reform in the last 2 days, I'm interested in whether there are more radical solutions being proposed and considered. And Professor Geeraert, you raised the consequences of the increasing delegitimation of the international federations, and you suggested that there are other ideas out there. So I would like you to expand upon that and indicate what would be the limits to reform as you understand it, and what would be some of the more radical proposals that you might endorse, and what would lead you to endorse such proposals?
So let's start with Arnaut, and then I'll ask Paul to weigh in also.
Thank you. I think this is a very, very interesting question. And the answer, it would be better to write a full PhD thesis about this answer.
But we won't have time for that.
Oh, okay. So, because we don't have time for that, I will keep it short. No. Yes, you are right. I can understand that a lot of people are pessimistic about the state of affairs in international sports governance. I would say that I am more optimistic because I think what's clear from my presentation and from the report is that international sports federations will have to reform, whether they like it or not. If they do not reform, they will simply go into a crisis. We will see disorder and instability in international sports governance. That's not something that they want. That's not something that we want. So what is the alternative? I think, and this is my personal point of view, no matter from what angle you look at this situation of international sports governance, you always need some sort of bodies to take care of the regulation of sport. It's as simple as that, whether it's these that are in place right now, they don't have to be, it can be other bodies, but you always need some form of global international organizational structures to take care of the regulation of sport, to tackle the many difficulties that face international sports governance today. There is no global government that can take over the role of international sports federations. There is no other form of public actor that can take over the roles of these organizations. They do have a very important function. They just need to improve their own internal workings. And even if they would disappear, we would have to install a different kind of global body to take care of the regulation of sport, to deal with the many challenges that face international sports governance today.
So let's go to Paul, and then Jens has a comment to make.
Well,
yep.
Well, first of all, it's a very interesting discussion. I think we need more people to act than us sitting here if we want to really reform or revolutionize. And I'm just saying, as a matter of fact, that the population is widely supporting and still contributing with buying tickets, supporting the sponsors, supporting the governments. I mean, we need more. You need more pressure from. We've seen that with FIFA now. Some of the sponsors have tried to act a bit, but again, let's look at the application process for 2026 and see how many governments are actually refraining from actually pursuing a host for the World Cup. I strongly oppose a global organization trying to regularize sports. I can't see the benefit because we can see maybe 20-25 countries that all agree on some of this, saying, yeah, we come from high levels when it comes to democracy, when it comes to transparency. But we need to acknowledge that such a global body also has to take care of the countries that are not like us, that are coming from other cultures, from other way of approaching democracy. So I strongly support the UN level. I think UN is the right answer to work with sport, because UN also do have the difficulties that they want to embrace all their members. They can't exclude anyone from the discussion, even though we don't like how the countries are being run. And therefore, I think we emphasize too much on a global regulation of sport, because again, we need all countries with us. We can't revolutionize with 30 countries on board. We need more.
Jens?
I mean, I think we are on a point where we have a clear answer concerning some of the federations. Let's talk about FIFA. There's only one clean, one proper, one honest solution. Destroy the World Federation FIFA and build up a new federation. You know, it is not a rocket science. If you talk about monopoly of sports, and you know that being a monopolist is a core point of the sport organizations. So it is not a rocket science to market a World Cup, to market a product, in this case the World Cup, if you have a monopoly. I was talking to one former FIFA official recently on Swiss TV, and I told him, I said, listen, if sponsors come to you, if TV stations come to you, and you are a monopoly, they are bidding, let's say, they are willing to give you 100 million, and you're telling them, okay, 150. So that's it. There's no competition at all. And this guy told me live on TV, yes, you are right. You know what I mean? So destroy the organization. In this case, this is a RICO. Don't forget that. This is a RICO, and you got to destroy it. Build up a new one. Don't talk about so-called elections on February 26. It does not make sense under this umbrella right now. And 2 more points, my last points. First is enable law enforcement agencies all over the world. Not only what we have seen, where is he? Nicholas over there, the FBI agent, not only the USA and the Department of Justice, what they have done, not only the Swiss authorities. That was a revolution. That was a revolution, and the fear is all over the Olympic world since May 27th. You don't have a pirate heaven anymore in Switzerland. You got to fear that they get you. They get you out of Borlaug in the morning, 5 o'clock, and then you don't go in a Mercedes, you go in an Opel Corsa. So that hurts. That hurts. And my last point is enable journalism, real free journalism. I'm talking about that at almost all play the game conferences. And when I heard the number, Erasmus Plus program, the number of money, the amount of money, 265, and I thought, wow, just 10%, 5% of it, give it to Andrew Jennings, Declan Hill, and some other guys, and you will get a result, an unbelievable result.
All right, the right side of the room has awoken. All right.
This is Nikolaos Theodorou from Greece. I'm representing the National Integrity Platform. Question goes to Ms. Zappelli. The IOC Ethics Commission issued a decision with recommendations against the president of the Greek Olympic Committee regarding the black market tickets for Sochi. As far as I know, there are no consequences for the Greek president. The question is, how really powerful these IOC Ethics Commission decisions are against members of the Olympic family that violate the Olympic Charter? Thank you.
This is back to what I said sometimes in the presentation with regard to the role and responsibility of the different stakeholders of the Olympic movement. The decision made by the Ethics Commission was approved by the Executive Board. It is in fact a decision not by the Ethics Commission but by the IOC Executive Board. And part of the independence of the National Olympic Committees, they decided to re-elect and strengthen the same presidents. So yes, that's what we said. We could probably go further and make a certain form of pressure on these NOCs. But this is no more it is then a political willingness of the IOC.
So do you believe that your power in the Ethics Commission is enough to catch the corruption within the Olympic movement?
As I mentioned also earlier, I really consider that the reality of, it's not a question of pushing powers against other powers or people against other powers, but to convince the people. Probably in this story, we did not convince enough the people from these National Olympic Committees to consider that they have to go ahead in another direction. Or, yes, it's difficult.
Thank you.
So we're down to our last 5 minutes, so I'd prefer a question that I can throw open to the panel. And, all right, Roland.
Roland Jack from I Trust Sport. We've seen increasing involvement of independent or semi-independent people in sport. Think of the WADA Commission, UCI's CERT Commission, Ethics Commission at the IOC and others. Do members of the panel think that it would be positive to see more independent, non-executive directors in international sport?
Yeah, so the question about independence, and one of the things I've noticed in taking a look at sport is that the definition of the concept of independent is often variable as to what it means. So does sport need more independent participants, and what does that actually mean in practice?
In practice, it means, look at FIFA, it means 5,000 Swiss francs at least per day. So, which shows us you can question the word of independence, yeah? So it's problematic, of course.
Yes, I think that's part of the solution, to have more independent people, specifically in the ethics committees, audit committees, but also in the boards, to have people from outside sport. Then, of course, the question is always, and Mr. Weiner is absolutely right, when are you independent and how do you establish independence? That's something very, very difficult. We will have to look into that. But yes, more independent people in international sports federations, that's a small part of the solution, increases accountability.
Oh yes, of course it is important, and also because these independent bodies are the only way to have different visions. But once again, it doesn't mean that politically it will be followed, but it's important to have effectively different voices, different angle, different vision, and that's also why it's important that journalists are also involved in this reflection. Yes, it's independence and new visions are key. Totally agreed.
Paul, what do you think about independent participants?
Definitely, but again, as we see also in our own countries, that doesn't mean that it's going into political changes, because we do have need political leaders that actually are able to implement the recommendations that are being set down by independent commissions. And of course, as Mr. Zappelli was saying, we need of course political backing, and therefore we need. I mean, you can't be. You must be aware of the political environment if you're accepting a seat at a political independent commission, because again, you can come up with all the recommendations you want, but if you can't have any political backing, then I don't see the needs. And then of course some of them are honored to or are being paid to be a member of a commission. That's also known in purely democratic countries that they're not working for free, and I don't think you can. I mean, you should take care if you're saying okay, then they can't come up with independent recommendations because they are paid.
All right, I will turn it over to Jens for final comment, but join me in thanking the speakers and the panel.
I would also like to thank the speakers for their contributions to a session that I personally looked much forward to, and I was not disappointed. I think the way that the positions were defined and cleared gave a very, very good picture of where the sports governance debate stands today. It does not end, fortunately. It continues in a session with Arnout and representatives of athletes. In one of the sessions, we have 3 other parallel sessions also coming up now. We have Anti-Doping Denmark, who will touch the question of autonomy in sport, which is also closely related to governance. We have a very interesting session of Azerbaijan and Baku, the European Games that have also been mentioned now. And then we have a little session for those who would like to see what my fantastic colleagues at the Danish Institute for Sports Studies have achieved with their research, a little look what we can session and what research actually can bring about in terms of influencing good decisions. I hope you will enjoy, but I have one thing I would like to repeat that Roger already said. Please deliver, those of you who speak and have PowerPoint presentations or other things you want to show, please deliver it well ahead of time in the secretariat, so we have time and do not have to wait while we upload and find them and so on. The earlier you deliver, the more control we can have on this. And again, we certainly hope you are coming to the FIFA evening this evening and the excursion, but should you not, go because you have other and more important issues than FIFA on your agenda, then please give your ticket, the ticket that was in your conference pack, please give that back to the Secretariat because there are people queuing up for the Elsinore Theatre tonight. It's a performance that they won't miss. Okay, now please go directly to your sessions, and we hope you'll... and thanks again to the speakers. I mean, you're not in a position. The point is, she is a human rights activist defending the rights of children in Brazil.
That I understand, but,
yes.
But then I don't know, she say I'm from the United Nations.